So today I want to talk to you guys about the story that we tell ourselves before we even show up in our conversation or before we show up in life that creates powerlessness and loneliness, if you ever wonder. So here it is. The first thing that we do is before we even show up, we have this narrative in our mind. We connect and we talk with each other. But what do we say? We, first of all, every time you show up to sell a story. It says, what do you mean by that? Every time you show up to sell a story, the story that you've been cultivating, that you've been nurturing in your head. What is that story? Story could be many things, but we're going to talk about the story that makes you feel incapable, makes you feel unmanageable, and makes you feel unrelatable. So that story inside your head is when you show up, you're trying to convince someone of that story. You're trying to convince the other person that you're going to be communicating, or whoever you're showing, whatever audience you're going to be showing up, you're going to communicate, hey, I'm not capable. I'm not so the way you perform. The second thing is you're going to also, once you have that story, you're going to submit to someone else's story. You see, when two people come together, they both have a story. They're talking to themselves about, man, can I speak? Can I communicate? Are they going to reject me? Are they going to be there for me? So there's these communication that we have in our head, and when we come together, it's a selling. It's like I'm going to submit to their story, and they're going to submit to mine. It's not conscious; it's subconscious. But when you're doing that, the worst thing about you submitting to someone else's story, you conceal how you feel, you conceal who you are. And when you conceal who you are and how you feel, you're going to have to put on a mask. And when you put on a mask, you can't communicate who you are. So there comes that feeling of loneliness. There comes that feeling of powerlessness. There comes that feeling of I'm not capable, I'm not relatable, right? And lastly, once you do that, then you start to settle for a self-sabotage story. You settle for your self-sabotage story. What is that? That's the past. You settle for what you've always learned in the past, always reviewed, always convinced yourself. You settle by collecting relationship from your past history to confirm why you couldn't do it. You collect from events that happened in your life why you were incapable, why you were not relatable, why you were not manageable, not able to manage things, not able to do things. You see, the first story submits to someone and then settle for the stuckness in your story. So that is not just convincing, it's committing. It's committing to your story. So how to break those conversation in your head. And I think the way you come to a relationship, or the way you come to an event that you're about to do. So some of the things that I do. All right, the three things that we can do that will help us to kind of change the narrative in our story. Number one, it's the way you communicate. Number one, you got to communicate to become courageous. It's interesting, right? You don't just communicate to be understood and all that, but I think it's communication could create a new person in you. So if you communicate to become courageous, because a lot of times we don't communicate what we need, we don't communicate what we want, we don't communicate what's in our heart. Why? Because we're afraid of maybe rejection, we're afraid of we're going to be abandoned, we're afraid of all these emotions, or which is a way of being, by the way. So what you want to do is you want to communicate with who you're going to become. So you communicate to become courageous. So that will give you, so it's not so much about the outcome, but it's who am I going to become through that outcome. I'm going to talk to somebody, and it may not be well, or I may feel scared, but once I communicate, who is the person that I'm going to become? That's why I say, number one is to communicate to become courageous, because that's the goal. You communicate to become confident and courageous. Okay. Second, communicate to connect. You see, a lot of times we, like I was just saying, we submit to somebody else, but we do not also reveal who we are. So communicate to connect. So if you're focusing on connecting to the heart of the person, you will be able to connect to the story, connect to how relatable you both and the person have, the common denominators, the common connection. But if your mind is focused on that, you will find a connection. And as soon as you find a connection, it's not about you anymore. It's not about your story, because you're letting go of your story, connecting to their story, connecting to how their story connects to yours. Okay. Lastly, you want to communicate to comprehend. Communication to comprehend is where you get to communicate to understand them, but to also comprehend yourself, right? Because when you're communicating with people, when you're because when you sell your story, you're selling your story to confirm your false identity. That's how I see it. But if you're communicating to comprehend the person, how the person is moving and communicating, then you remove yourself from the equation and you start to see yourself. You start to see a part of you that you might have never showed up, that didn't show up. But if you communicate to become courageous, you communicate to connect, and you communicate to comprehend versus always being understood, then I believe you're going to create this authentic communication. Well, thank you so much for watching my videos. Please do subscribe if you like the video, and please share it. And also click on the bell button there so you can be notified with any new videos that I come out with. Thank you.